Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to be talking about perimeter, which is a pretty easy concept. However, what I'm going to focus on in this video is how to solve perimeter problems, especially using variables, meaning when you don't know what the value of sides are. Also, I'm going to go into talking about how to solve word problems that have perimeter, so especially some tricky ones. So definitely stay tuned for that. So the first idea that we'll talk about with perimeter, is perimeter is the measure of all sides added together. It's the sum of all sides. So the strategy to find perimeter is to add all your sides together. Now, students confuse area and perimeter occasionally. The difference between area and perimeter is that area, we are talking about what is the square units inside of a shape. Perimeter, we don't care about the inside of the shape. We want to know what is the length around the shape. So a good way to think about perimeter is a fence. A fence around a school would show the perimeter around the school. All right. So let's hop down here. I've drawn some figures. In the first figure, you can see, we can see right away it has two congruent sides, our two bases, our top and our bottom, and then the sides are congruent with one another. So this tells us that this is a rectangle. Also, we notice it has some right angles. This is probably a rectangle. So let's talk about how you might find the perimeter for this when you have not numbers, but variables. Okay. So notice here, I don't have numbers. I have two letters. H often represents height, and B represents base. So let's talk. How could we show adding all of these up? What would that look like? Well, because we know that this is congruent with this, we can go ahead and just say that that is also a base. We know that because these are the same value. If this was 10, this would be 10. If this was 155, this would also be 155. So it's okay for me to repeat my variable. I can say that this is B and this is B. The same thing goes for our sides here. If this is H, this is congruent with H. That means that I can just say this is also H. Again, if this is 100, this is 100. If this is 30, this is 30. Okay, so what I said before is still true. Perimeter is the sum of all measures around a shape. Well, if I were to do that here, it would be H added to B, added to H, added to B. So let me write that. Our perimeter, and I'll use P to represent perimeter, is our base plus our base plus our height plus our height. Okay? That's one way that we could show it. But as we've talked about before in algebra, you'll notice that we have two B's and we also have two H's. So another way to write this is that we have two B's added to two H's. So those are two ways that we can show perimeter, the formula for perimeter for a rectangle. Let's move on to this shape here. We notice right away that it has some congruent sides. All the sides are congruent because they all have the same sign of congruency. We don't have any right angles, so we can't assume that it is a square. They might be slightly skewed. But we do know that these are all congruent. Let's go ahead and call these B. Now again, just like our rectangle, because we know that this is congruent with this, this, and this, we can also label these all as B. Okay? If we know that, and we know perimeter is the sum of all of our variables, what kind of formula could we come up with? Well, we could say that our perimeter, our P, is equal to our base plus our base plus our base plus our base. just like in the previous formula, you might recognize that we could simplify that. We have 4 b's. So to simplify that, we could also just say perimeter is equal to 4b. All right. Last but not least, let's go over here. We're going to zoom in and we're going to look at our trapezoid. Trapezoids are no different than other shapes, although this time you'll notice that we have a height. Okay. A lot of times they will include a height with a trapezoid because that's important for finding area. For perimeter, we don't really care about it. You might see base 1 written with a small little 1 like this. And you might see base 2 written with a small little 2 like this. Don't confuse that as an exponent, or don't confuse that as a coefficient. That's just to let us know that we're talking about one base down here and another base up here. That's very common with trapezoids. These might just be called sides. Maybe we'll call this side 1, and maybe we'll call this side 2. So again, I'm just using a little subscript number to show that I have side 1 and side 2. This is pretty standard. You would just add all of these up. Base 1 plus base 2 plus side 1 plus side 2. Now you'll notice none of our variables are the same because none of our sides are congruent. So in terms of the formula for perimeter for our trapezoid here, we can just be safe just saying base 1 plus base 2 plus side 1 plus side 2. All right. So before I finish the video, what I want to go over is a problem you might be faced with that involves area. So let's go over this type of problem. Let me make some room. You might see a problem like this. Area of our rectangle is equal to 56 feet squared. And base is equal to 7 feet. What is the height? Now, this kind of goes into the formula for how we find area. So I'm just going to briefly mention how we find area. Area for a rectangle is base times height. Okay, so in order to solve this, we need to know that we have one of those variables already. We already have our b. Our b is equal to 7 feet. And our area, we also have that. Our area is equal to 56 feet squared. So the question is, how could we figure out what our height is? Well, you could guess and check. You could ask yourself, what times 7 is equal to 56? That's one way you could solve it. Another way you could solve it is you could simply divide this side by 7 feet. Doing that would let us figure out what our h would be. 56 divided by 7 is equal to 8 feet. Our answer for our h is 8 feet. Okay, so hopefully you have some good information now about how to solve perimeter and some area problems when you have unknowns.